A very great morning. It happens to be a Monday of this great month of November 2020. We're live from Kampala's Renner Conference Center, and today we're talking about women in business. Well, Uganda, like other countries, have experienced unprecedented shocks to its economic growth due to COVID-19. Now, the government has undertaken many initiatives focusing on reigniting the economic growth, but how inclusive have those initiatives been? So today, as we discuss the road to Uganda's economic recovery in specific reference on inclusion of vulnerable women, we are finding lasting solutions. This conversation is under the theme Women in Business, the Doubting Road to Recovery. Now, to bring this home, we have Dr. Muhammad Afraid, a lecturer of economics at the Makerere University and has worked as an economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. We have Edith Tusubira, the Executive Director of Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, but she has been replaced by Rachel Vanessa Muhwezi, the Manager of Microfinance Institution. Then we have Mrs. Monica Emeru, the Executive Director of the National Association of Women's Organization in Uganda, NAU. And Elizabeth Kemigisha is a feminist lawyer, a lawyer currently working with FIDA Uganda as a coordinator of Women Economic Justice Program. Well, the panelists on Zoom joining us today, we have Maureen Apio, the coordinator, Northern Uganda, that is UWEP, Minister of Labour, Gender, Labour and Social Development. And we have Jen Grace Amoge, is a co-founder and currently the operations director at the Uhuru Institute for Social Development. Well, this show is organized by the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers, that is FIDA Uganda, and the Network for Women's Organization in Uganda, now with financial support from the Forum for Women in Democracy. Now, the hashtag is Economic Recovery Uganda. Join us for this conversation to start off with. Good morning, my great panelists.
Good morning.
It's interesting, we're discussing women issues, but the beauty about it, we're men on this panel as well, and it's making it much more exciting. Well, to start off with the entire economic recovery, let me start off with now, Monica, for the engagements you've had on ground, after COVID-19 came in play, how crazy were your phones buzzing from the women who wanted to really find the resiliency to stabilize on ground?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, my phones rang a few times.
Okay.
But I would like to say that it wasn't as crazy as one should have expected.
Okay.
Because I think women are extremely resilient, and they only talk to you because they want to feel like there's somebody else who is with me.
Association, yes.
Yes, but they also want to feel like what I'm doing is right. After that, they actually move on with what they are doing.
The way they should be running.
Yes. So there are very many women who did all sorts of things, including spending nights at the market because home is very far and there's no transport. I can't walk home, so I spend a few days at the market. There are women from Luero who were in markets and there were no markets operating, and they came and sat by the roadside and sold their things. There are women who became hawkers, moving around with their food so that they are able to sell and it doesn't rot in the garden.
All this was resiliency.
Yes, all that is resilience. And
well,
yeah.
From the margins to the center, amplifying women's voices and facilitating meaningful participation in the economic recovery discourse. It's a conversation that's at the center of this. FIDA. Elizabeth, you, I like the word feminist though in your intro, but as FIDA, as an organization, I'm very grateful that it changes from what we have always looked at FIDA from the perspective of media that you always fight possibly household issues, but now this is about women and empowering them financially. From the margin of the center and all that, how best can we amplify the women? What is FIDA looking at this?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. First of all, yes, FIDA does not only deal with domestic violence issues. We do have programs on economic justice.
Perfect.
We do have programs on sexual reproductive health and a lot more. Now, we are concerned about the different initiatives in place to ensure that we are back on track, that all this academic talk about the GDP, about inflation, that a woman fine in a park may not be able to understand,
yes.
is able to understand. They're supposed to understand what's going on because they are actually suffering the brunt of all this.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so we are concerned about how inclusive most of these initiatives have been. many from the different line ministries of the government that aim to amplify women after all that happened. So we are concerned because a woman in Napak, a woman in Luero does not even know where to go. That a woman who had a loan with a SACCO, with a money lenders institution, does not know any protection that is available for them to do this work. That when the government says we do have a stimulus package through UDB and the microfinance support center, and there is this much money for all borders, for all the women in the markets, for women in saloons, women in arcades, women that hawk their businesses here and there. What are the processes that these women have to go through to receive this money? That World Bank in July released a lot of money, and they're saying we have all these plans to ensure that the economy is back on track. And most of this will go to the vulnerable women, to the people at the margins. But how many women have been involved in these conversations? I feel like most of these conversations have happened in our different offices, under the different ministries. You're planning for someone whose need you are not even aware of, right? So when you speak about, for example, money for Myoga under UDB and the Microfinance Center, you're talking about having a stack of about 15 and 20 people to be able to access the money.
30 million.
30 million shillings. It looks like a lot of money. It is a lot of money for the different sectors which it's meant for. These women do not know these processes. You're talking about having collateral. You're talking about having a business that has worked with around 100 million plus.
And has experience for at least 6 months.
Thank you. And there are all these different papers that they're supposed to fill and application forms. I do not think that a woman from Luero in a group where they save, say, 10,000 every week is able to undergo this process. They've not interfaced with 100 million, but 10 million would jumpstart their business, their farming. So we are concerned that the conversation going on right now on economic recovery and on inflation and on how much money we are getting from the World Bank, from the European Union, is for the elites. It's for NGOs like FIDA and NAU to say we understand how do we follow. But we are also still left at the side. For example, how does an NGO like FIDA follow up money that was sent by World Bank?
And reaches down on the ground.
Yes, which is supposed to get to the woman that I work with, right? If I'm not certain about what the recovery plan actually looks like for Uganda. So we are extremely concerned that the women at the margins are not at the center of this conversation, that you're borrowing big sums of money, claiming that it's supposed to help these people. Well, so it's of concern to us.
We're coming back to that. Now, Monica, you work a lot more with women on the ground and in the villages and in the different clusters. What do you make of all these? She says that as FIDA, they are concerned by the participation in the economic recovery discourse for the women on the ground. What do you make of it?
I think Elizabeth has said a lot about that already. We actually work hand in hand, where NAU is FIDA is, because FIDA is a member of NAU. The category of women that we work with are women who are either with very low levels of education or no education at all. We work with women who are in small groups. They are trying to make do of their agency. That if we come together as organized groups, then we'll be able to put our energies together, put our minds together, and we come up with something. We do agribusiness maybe, or they have cottage industries. There are women, mostly women with disabilities, who are making sweaters, women who are making, who have been making school uniforms. They've made sure they have their machines. They have some basic equipment. But right now, with COVID-19, they were not able to work that much in their farms. For example, if you know the terrain of Luero, somebody has a little piece of land in Luero town, but somewhere in one of the rural areas, in the villages, deep in the villages, they have a garden. Now, during COVID-19, there was no transport for them to go to their farms. And then they also work in groups. They couldn't work in groups. It wasn't allowed to work in groups. So it is those kind of women who have been extremely disadvantaged by the pandemic, but also the lockdown that we are talking about. Now, government has very good plans in place, but has government done a study of their audience? We are talking about meaningful participation. Meaningful participation means you involve me
inclusion
in the design. You'd involve me in the implementation, because if I'm involved in the design, then you'll understand what are those issues that are affecting me? How do they affect me? And then I get involved in the implementation and then eventually monitoring. It looks like, yes, there are very good policies that are made at the national level, but how do those policies, or how do those frameworks, how do those plans target that woman? And we are talking about approximately 70% of the population.
Monica, do you feel by any chance that there is lack of inclusion of that vulnerable woman in the entire plan? Do you feel it's more like from up to down approach more than down to up approach?
Yes, it is a largely, it's not a bottom-up approach, but a top-down approach. And when that happens, there is exclusion. The government, I read about the stimulus package, and it talks about small, medium, and large enterprises. So it's those companies that are registered, that have functioned for a certain period of time.
They use the word compliant.
Exactly.
For taxes, I think.
Exactly. Now, in my community, in my village, in Luero, in Napak, in Kaberamaido, I pay some form of taxes, maybe not directly to URA, but I still pay taxes. I produce, and what I produce actually ends up in these enterprises that are small, medium, and large. So how am I going to be supported at that level so that I'm also able to recover from what everyone else has experienced? And probably that woman we are talking about has even experienced it worse than the elite. So how are all those levels supported so that the growth is bottom-up growth? It is from micro to macro. I feel that most of the time we are focusing on the macro and excluding the micro. If we exclude the micro, no matter how much macroeconomic growth we realize, in terms of the change that we want to see, in terms of social development, we are not going to reach the level that we would have reached if we actually started with the micro and targeted that very poor woman, that very disadvantaged woman who is probably also HIV positive. Many of the women we work with are HIV positive. Women with disabilities. In Luero, I think we have over 250 women with disabilities that we work with. What is going to happen to them?
Well, bring this conversation to context. Mr. Muhumuza, as an economist, you've advised the Minister of Economic Planning and all. With that kind of level where you sit, do we have a recovery strategy as a country for COVID-19? And what is the inclusion strategy for the women especially?
Well, it's a tall order to have a conversation with. Let me first say, when I got a call from Elizabeth Feed, I was like, okay, what have I done? what have I done? But it was an economist, and I'm happy that this part of FIDA is coming. Let me say, if the women don't recover, we cannot recover. That should be a statement out there.
Oh, yes.
Because this economy runs on agriculture, and agriculture in Uganda runs on the women.
Oh, yeah.
So clearly, if they do not recover, the country can't recover. And until we put that into context, then that will begin to inform all our other policies.
Oh, yeah.
That's number one. Two, we cannot talk about a recovery when COVID is still on the rise.
Oh, yeah.
So one of my statements has been, this is first hibernation, life preservation.
Okay.
When
We are surviving now.
To survive.
Yes.
When winter comes, all you need is stay warm.
Oh, yes.
Even the birds run away, others hide themselves.
Yes.
So we are still in that hibernation mode. As the president put it, stop and listen. And unfortunately, we didn't listen enough. We have jumped out, and COVID is all over.
Oh, yeah.
Our healthcare facilities are swamped. Not that because there are too many people who are sick, but in the first place, these healthcare facilities were inadequate themselves. So in Uganda, even when you have 1,000, you have nowhere to accommodate them.
You can't. Yeah.
So even 200 will swamp you to death.
Yeah.
And yet the numbers are still coming up. So we are going to be looking at this situation of we are still rolling down. Our GDP was projected to grow by above 6%. It grew by 2.9. We do not know whether we recover. But even that little recovery, or survive of the recovery, of the 2.9, was hanging on agriculture.
Which agriculture solely depends on the women.
Exactly.
So our manufacturing, which was growing at 10%, the other year grew by 2. Service has also collapsed. It's only agriculture that remained within expected ranges.
Oh, yes.
Because of the women out there. Because for me, agriculture is women.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to put this into context. To begin the conversation, they are saying, even when you are doing a top-bottom planning, what are you bringing from the top? It should not be directives. Money should be spent this way.
Oh,
money
yes.
should be. You only bring some knowledge on how do I understand the bottom. Because the entire planning must begin from the bottom up.
Yes.
The only thing we are bringing from the top is what should be the questions. So from my academic angle, the top is very clear that the welfare of a household is directly dependent on women. That's what we should be bringing to the bottom. The other thing is women are more loyal with loans
Than men.
than men. And people have exploited that to say, for us in our microfinance, women are the priority. 90% of the loans, but they are securing themselves.
They take that up, yes.
But women are more loyal. Even when she's not able to pay because the sewing machine was not working, she will sell her goat to pay the loan. The man will remind you and say, the border was stolen. How do you expect me to pay you?
I know.
Go away, the thing was, the woman will really tap her network
We'll find a way.
and pay you. So even as we design these recovery strategies, when we get the recovery mode, those are the people you want to give and empower. Because they will even pay the loans of the men. It has happened.
Yeah, yeah.
They do.
The man defaults, he's going to jail.
The wife pays
The
and
wife will
says,
find her friends and raise the money and get that man out of jail. So that's the foundation, the other thing you really want to bring on the table.
oh, yeah.
Thirdly, women loans are very, very vulnerable. And I think the only entity with a good model in this Uganda is BRAC.
Oh, yeah.
BRAC Microfinance. And it doesn't not BRAC Uganda, but this is their global practice. If you give me a loan to raise goats, and any of the children fall sick, the woman will sell that goat to treat the child. The man will hang around and disappear. Somehow the child will be treated. He's preserving his
They
goat.
come back after.
So all these loans were given out as recovery strategies. If we do not invest in the things that take away the women's money from the business,
Yeah.
these businesses are endangered.
Yeah.
So when we are assessing women's businesses, we do not assess them by what is in the business. We also go back and say, but what are your other responsibilities? Her
Oh, yeah.
in-laws, her children,
The dependents.
they are going to drag money out of this business. So the two goats are going to be stolen for her to treat the child. So women's businesses and women in business requires us to really bring a new academic and practical thinking on how do you support the women in business. You must support that entire infrastructure that the women are engaged in. Home care,
Oh, yes.
that entire home care. The village health teams, the community health workers must support to make sure these children don't fall sick. When the woman gives birth, what is the network that supports? Because you're going to leave the business
Oh, yes.
to go back to take care of this one day.
What support structure do they
What
plug
support
in?
structure do they have? So if you're looking at women in business, it's not just we gave them a loan and a place to work in. If you have not supported that entire ecosystem, this woman is as vulnerable as before COVID, and COVID has made it worse. I will end with one example. My nurse, I used to come to Bombo Road. I said, how are you coming? This was the COVID lockdown. She was walking from Nansana, 10 kilometers
To Bomba Road.
to come to Bombo Road and work. Now the male doctors had cars, but they also had shifts. The nurse didn't have a shift.
Oh, yes.
This is how bad it can. They are all in business,
Yes.
but certainly not in the same boxes. So for me, the top down should only come with open eyes to say what is on the ground. This plan must speak to that woman she's talking about.
Yes.
She's in Ruwero, but her business is 10 kilometers away.
So how does she
She
still
must
operate?
keep both of them working. She can't ride a bicycle, not that because she doesn't know, but the bicycle belongs to the man. And unfortunately, when we locked down, bicycles were the means of travel.
I know.
It is complex.
Complex.
And that's why I really want to appreciate FIDA and AWOT for bringing this conversation.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. That is Mr. Mhumuza, a remarkable gentleman. He has actually expounded on that. Now, this seems to be a little more about finances and all that. I want to tap into Humra now. Rachel Vanessa Muhwezi, please, if I could have you now. What do you make of this entire conversation, Rachel Vanessa Muhwezi? Okay, well, she'll be joining us a little later. Coming back to you, Fida. Women inclusion, especially finances talk about the loans, not in the sense of the way Muhumuza was worried when you gave the call.
Yeah.
About the loans of women, the loyalty of women and loans. What do you make of it as Fida?
I want to agree with Dr. Fred about, I'd never looked at it that way though, the fact that microfinance institutions actually manipulate the fact that women are more loyal to paying back monies because they're better organized.
Okay.
Yeah. Our methodology of work at FIDA and now in the work that we do in economic justice, we've seen that women that have been supported to organize are actually capable of doing business and growing over time.
Okay.
As long as they have the support to see that you're registering them, that you're linking them to the markets, that you're finding ways of improving their product, value addition, that
Over
as soon
time.
as she's done with growing her hibiscus, she has a way of producing it into a powder or a liquid. Are you linking them to a supermarket that can buy their product? Are you getting them the right marketing? Right? So many of the women we've seen currently are able to only access money from Tier 4 microfinance institutions. And I think when Rachel gets on, she'll speak to that. The circles mostly. I know that BRAC, for example, has been of great support for the work that Nau and FIDA have been doing in Luweero district on supporting women with loans. They have a very good methodology. They give even as low as 60,000. 100,000, depending on what your business looks like and how much time you really need to pay back the money. So most of these money lenders are quick to give money. And even before COVID, 85% of the women's groups that we've dealt with as NAU and FIDA, many of them had loans from different money lenders, from cooperatives, from circles, right? Now, came at a time when there were all these directives about making sure that people are paying back money, but the banks and the financial institutions generally are more understanding of the fact that we are dealing with COVID and people are not getting in as much money as they were before. Now, that was the trouble. That most of the initiatives, even in the beginning, were to the bank. So we are going to speak to so-and-so bank. We are going to speak to this bank to make sure that you have this amount of time to pay this money within this period. Forgetting that the women that we are planning for, the women that we are saying have been affected most, do not actually get money from most of these banks. They get money from the money lenders, right? Sorry, the money lenders and the circles. We know that the methodologies that many of them use are extremely shrewd.
The money lenders.
Yes, to collect their money.
Piga kabisa.
So you found that this woman is not able to sell as much as she used to sell every day. So most of them service loans on a weekly basis. So she has to take back 50,000 on a weekly basis. If she's unable to collect that money, that means that money lender is going to come and say, so we saw most of them having their dryers picked up from the saloons, right? To go and pay the money that they owe them. Yeah. So I feel like even at this point, when the government developed the stimulus budget to say 30 million for the MSMs.
Emyoga.
When you look at this Emyoga thing, it's very well articulated. It looks like a very
But
good
is it
plan.
feasible from your angle?
It's not at all.
Why?
You're talking about having collateral. How many of these women, if I'm unable to get money from a bank in the first place, and you're telling me now that you have your plan where I need to have collateral, and we know that for most times collateral in Uganda looks like a land title or a sales agreement. Most of these women plant or use their farming. They use vibanja that belongs to either one of the group of the members, and then that's
Or
really
community
it,
land, yes.
right? Then you're looking at the processes, like I talked about, the documentation that they have to fill to receive this money, to be able to pay back these loans.
That's complex as well.
It's extremely difficult for these women to navigate this system. So the borrowing and lending practices during COVID and just post-COVID. Now, I don't know if you can say post-COVID, because
No,
Dr. Fred
in COVID,
mentioned
because we're still running.
still, in this new normal, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I do not know if institutions like UMRA that deal with Tier 4
lenders.
microfinance institutions actually plugged in on how do they protect the borrower. Because we have the Act Clear of 2016 on money lenders and, and what to do, and the protection that they offer is mostly to the financial institution. So how do we ensure that at the end of the day, the borrower is
protected.
not, does not fall prey of getting their stuff, their business sold, so that they can pay back this money.
Okay.
So we are going to need government to come out very strongly to
And explain on
protect
this.
borrowers, especially women from these microfinance institutions.
Okay.
And they've mastered, by the way, the art. They go to the ground. They come with vans to your shop. They'll give you the form. They'll help you fill the form. So you don't even have to move to go
To
to
the
the
bank
office.
or whatever
So
they are.
they're efficient, and that's how fast they'll come to collect
But
whatever you have.
when it comes
So
to
we
you to
need
meet,
government to come out very strongly to protect the borrowers in these institutions.
it's a conversation, and that is Elizabeth Kamigisha from FIDA Uganda. We're still having this conversation. Now, to take this a little notch higher, we're joined by Jen Amuge, who happens to be from Uhuru Cooperatives. I've read the reports from Uhuru Cooperatives. They're very, very interesting. How I wish Ministry of Finance could plug into cooperatives with regards to the Uhuru reports they have been releasing of recent. It's interesting. Now, Jen, from where you stand as Uhuru, you've worked with women on different discourses and you've seen how resilient they are on the ground. Do cooperatives present a viable vehicle for the women to, to come up in this new normal, not post-COVID, but in this new normal?
Thank you for having me. Just a correction, it's Uhuru Institute for Social Development and work with cooperatives. And I think you're referring to the Cooperator magazine, which is a fully fledged media house. So those are magazines that we publish for the public, but also specifically for the sector. But back to the question that you've asked, cooperatives are very viable vehicles for recovery post-COVID or during the new normal. And just as I was invited to be part of this conversation, as I thought through what we are talking about, the first thing I asked myself is, are we resilient? Are we prepared when we find ourselves in scenarios like COVID? And I think just looking at the woman when COVID, before COVID and now, I think generally I would say that women had pre-existing vulnerabilities that were only exacerbated by COVID. And in terms of the role of cooperatives to get these women recover, cooperatives present very, very good opportunities for them. One, the fact that we have pre-existing vulnerabilities in the form of limited access to credit, in the form of limited access to collateral in terms of land or any other thing that financial institutions would want, cooperatives would give women opportunity to come in groups within the cooperatives, but also for themselves. Because of the trust systems that cooperatives have, women are easily understood and given space to lend or to access credit within flexible means and terms. But also, when you look at the social challenges that women have when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to children falling sick and all that, the nature of cooperatives is that we are able to do business in any sector, whether it's healthcare, whether it's providing for funeral solutions or education services within the cooperative. So in essence, women have a great chance when they belong to cooperatives in terms of business, access to financing, but also if the cooperative has a dynamic business portfolio that takes care of economic businesses, but also takes care of social services like access to education and access to healthcare, then you know that even as we're in the new normal, a woman would find a within the cooperative. But looking at the reality on ground, I think the picture is a bit different. The work that Uhuru has been doing with the cooperatives shows that we need everybody that belongs and engages in cooperatives first to understand what these entities or infrastructure is like. My reading is that a lot of women belong to groups, and groups are not necessarily cooperatives. And therefore, the challenges that the groups present is that they focus on short-term ways of doing things, while cooperatives would present them with a longer-term perspective to either business or providing of social services. So I think we as a women movement, whether it's Uhuru or FIDA, NAU, and everyone else that is working with the sector, we should be looking at helping these women convert these groups into viable cooperative businesses where they can plan, where they can strategize to actually engage in big time thinking and big time businesses. Within the groups, these women have been positioned to receive monies from government. And I'm glad to have Ms. Apio here, where she's with you, where women accessing money from government at no interest rate. But just a few minutes ago, we just received a story that has been published from NEBI, where the UWEP funds are not being paid on time. And according to our reporter, just 30% of the money has been paid by the women, especially as a result of COVID. And one of the things they pointed out to is the attitude of the women, that they feel that this money is being given to them by government for free. So they see it as political freebies. Now, if they were in a cooperative, they would know that they're in a business that has borrowed and a business that must be paid. So what am I saying? More women involved in actual cooperatives that are value-based, that are driven by principles, would benefit more if they worked together within that kind of infrastructure. But more so, with cooperatives, there is also a lot that women can enjoy in the new normal. One is training. Cooperatives enable for these women to access training, not only in areas that are financial interest in nature, but in agronomic practices or in any other form of business that they are engaged in. But also the issue of equality. We cannot discuss economic recovery, whether in the new normal or in the normal sense, when we do not tackle the issue of equality. Cooperatives present an opportunity for both women and men to take decisions through the infrastructure of the annual general meeting, where both men and women have an opportunity to bring out their good ideas and drive their businesses in a certain direction. But while that is the ideal, the women are also challenged, because if you leave your home to go for a meeting in a cooperative and your husband is not part of this meeting, he can ask you so many questions. So when did you last, why do you think I should stay home and you go out there to have meetings? So the conversation on economic recovery or economic empowerment needs to happen within an ecosystem where government or other infrastructure understands that they need to help women in changing the way they structure the position from a government perspective, but also from a cultural perspective. I think for now, I'll stop there and be ready to have more conversation as we go on. Thank you.
And we'll get back to you a little later, but thank you so much for that submission. Monica, whatever she's said, I think makes a lot more sense. And to bring it to context, some people doing cooperatively are knowing, by default, if I should say. What do you make of her submission?
We actually work very closely with the Uhuru Institute of Social Development. The work that we do in Luero, we started working with women in groups. I think when we started, I said that women naturally have understood that agency matters, and they have organized themselves into groups. Some of them are what they call Nigina groups or merry-go-round. They collect money and give one person so that she can address a problem. Some are for other things. There was a music, dance, and drama group that we were working with when we just started. And as we progressed with this work, which started in 2015, we started realizing, and because we were also learning from other spaces, we started realizing that cooperatives might be a good way to go. And that is how Uhuru Institute of Social Development comes to partner with us. So we asked them as experts of working with cooperatives, how can you support the women in the groups to now become cooperative societies? So as we speak now, I have 6 legally registered cooperative societies in the from the Luero group. There are others that are in process. And we think that with time, they should be able to run on their own. unlike groups that depend entirely, when there is money from an NGO, there is project money, and we are going to benefit from project money. And when the project ends, most likely the work that we have been doing with the project will also end. But with cooperatives now, they are being equipped to understand that this is our thing. We have to value it, we have to drive it ourselves. For example, their annual general meetings are not funded by the project. We support them maybe with inputs, with the, we pay the facilitators to train them. But when it comes to their meetings,
It's
we leave
entirely
them. It's entirely them, because it helps them to grow.
Oh,
It
yes.
helps them to develop that ownership.
That's the inclusion you're talking about.
It's partly the inclusion we are talking about at that level, but then there is the inclusion where there's a government process that is going on and they need to be involved. And that is where Dr. Muhumuza talked about, yes, the policies might come from the top and it is top bottom, but the top should be asking questions, and those questions should go to the bottom, which are these cooperatives. And they have their organizing already that you can actually tap into and have a conversation with them and understand how best can we address, how do we support this category of people.
Wow.
I also wanted to speak on Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program.
That is something very interesting. I'm going
Yes,
to put it to before gender.
Before COVID-19 came in, about 2017, because we were training these women business management, developing business plans, and making them understand that this money that you put in the business, you have to count it. Every shilling that you put in, you count,
Yes.
and then at the end of it all, you can be able to tell whether you have a profit.
Oh,
so
yes.
whether you have borrowed or not borrowed, you still have
You
to
need
make
to count.
You have to make yes, you have to count, and you have to make a profit. So some of the women from Luero, Elizabeth, I think there were about 6 groups, accessed that money of
Uganda Women
UWEP.
Empowerment.
Let's call it UWEP. And
The ones in Nebi, according to what she said, from their reporter, some funds were misappropriated.
Yes, yeah. So these women from Luero, because
Yes.
they were already trained, they were equipped to run their agriculture as businesses.
Oh, yes.
They were able to pay back. And today, up to today, Ministry of Gender talks about the Luero women. I think it's the example that comes
It is a model now.
all the time when they talk about UWEP. But we want to see more women getting
Engaged.
involved. Actually, before we even trained the women in Luero, we met with the coordinators of UWEP at the Ministry of Gender, and we said, give us some money so that we train the women for you.
Oh,
After
yes.
we have trained the women, you give them the money. And then we were told the money is not for NGOs, for training. We are supposed to give loans. So the experience in Nebi most likely is that there were women in groups, and they thought we can give these women money. But were these women trained to count every shilling
Financially.
and know that we are investing this money and we are borrowing, so we have to pay back? Because also one of the things that we do, apart from the money that is borrowed from microfinance institutions, the women themselves have their village savings and loans.
Oh, yes.
And they borrow from there and they pay back.
With an interest.
Yeah, yeah, a small interest. So that is practicing ground for them. They learn from their village VSLA, and when they go out to borrow, they actually know how to manage loans.
Wow. That's a great conversation. Now joining us is Rachel Vanessa Muhwezi, manager microfinance institution from the Humra. Rachel, I'm sure you can hear me. There is a lot of conversation that has been going on. One, it's how is the borrower protected, because from the submission of Elizabeth here, says that the borrowers are very cunning and they actually come to the ground with all these microfinance under the TFO microfinance support. They come, but the way they take the collaterals on the other side, if one fails, how are the women protected, Kwanzaa, in that regard? Rachel?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority. I can first introduce what WUMRA is. Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority was established under the Tier 4 Microfinance Institutions and Money Lenders Act 2016, and the mandate for WUMRA, Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, is to license regulate and supervise the Tier 4 microfinance institutions and money lenders. Thank you, Andrew, for that question. When COVID came, it was a hit on the informal microfinance sector, where WUMRA had to come in as a regulator for the informal microfinance sector to issue guidelines. And this is how the borrowers were protected. We issued guidelines, and one of them was for the microfinance institutions that were licensed, supervised and regulated by Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority to consider a case-by-case basis of loan restructuring. So we believed that all women in business that had acquired loans from the informal sector of the Tier 4 microfinance institutions and money lenders, they were able to benefit from this. We have not had scenarios where our licensee had confiscated any collateral for the borrowers because they failed to pay during COVID, because we all understand that what happened during COVID, the households could not, they had shocks in incomes, the borrowers could not meet their loan obligations, and this caused for the regulator to come in and issued guidelines for the institutions to consider a case-by-case basis to carry out a loan restructuring. So, Andrew, that is how the borrowers have been protected. And actually, under Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority that oversees the Tier 4 sector, we have what we call a complaint handling mechanism, that if a borrower is engraved, can walk into our office and log in a complaint against our licensee, where we mediate between this borrower and the licensee, or they can always reach us on our numbers on 041 77999700. Any engraved borrower in the Tier 4 sector, you can always reach us. You can even reach us on our website, that is www.umra.go.ug. So this is, you know, COVID caused a lot of crisis that even our institutions could not supply credit. They had liquidity challenges, we all know, because where their main capital was the repayments from the borrowers, and the borrowers could not repay their loans on time. So they were constrained that they could not even supply credit as it was before COVID, and even during post-COVID, they have actually been having liquidity challenges, where WUMRA has been recommending these institutions for recapitalization from Uganda, from Microfinance Support Center, from UDB, and these are the institutions that had that stimulus package for COVID response.
Okay, Rachel, whatever you've said, the channels you use to reach out to these people, from where I stand, I'm looking at a woman in a BIM district or in Noya district, someone who is not conversant with coming to office. And, you know, I lodge in a complaint, it's written down if there is anyone who is there actually to, you know, write my complaint as it is without distortion. As someone who is not versed with issues to do with internet or website, we're talking about a vulnerable Ugandan woman in the dark corridors of information. Do you, as WUMRA, have a strategy that comes from up and it reaches down to this woman in the villages that they are not in one way or the other, you know, doomed by the money lenders, that their property and their collaterals whatsoever are not taken by these money lenders? Because what you're saying is feasible to someone in the urban areas or peri-urban areas or someone in the formal sector. But let's talk about the vulnerable person in the villages. What's the strategy for WUMRA?
Thank you, Andrew. WUMRA has a bottom strategy where it is working with all local governments in Uganda. Because WUMRA oversees all institutions in Uganda countrywide, WUMRA has had, it is actually preparing to have an MOU with Ministry of Gender, where we have community development officers, and we have actually worked with them. We have carried out sensitization workshops countrywide. we have always gotten these login complaints to us when we carry out these sensitization workshops. And again, what we are looking at also, that during these sensitization workshops, we are able to listen to the grassroots of that borrower who is down there, who does not understand the English we are talking about, who can speak their local language. We do countrywide media campaigns on radio, on TV, like now. Like on the radio, we always speak in their local language, and we are able to listen to them. And if there is any moneylender who is pointed out, we always look out for those moneylenders, because it is in our law, it is implied. Any moneylender operating without a license is convicted by courts of law, it is a penalty. And if you find any licensee who is under Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, they always know what they're supposed to do. They are always taken through during our sensitizations. And to get those complaints also, WUMRA is having a strategy of opening up regional offices countrywide, where we shall still be going to the grassroots of operations to listen to the ground person who is involved in this. WUMRA oversees self-help groups. Self-help groups include the women in business, where you find a composition of a group is actually 90%. And in these groups, they are always registered by the community development officer, who is on the grassroots, understanding what goes through the woman, what goes through to these women in business, who can also log in the complaints that they have complained on the ground. If there is any moneylender, we work with RDCs, we work with sub-county community development officers. So all these are women or any other aggrieved borrower can go through into those localities, in those government structures, and we shall always get a complaint. Thank you, Andrew.
Are you aware that some of these loan officers, they could actually be, certified and credited by you, that when a woman requests for, let me say, 10 million, they'll tell them that I'm going to give you this 10 million, but the interest is weird, that it's not feasible for them to return it in time. What are you doing about those ones who are already registered under WUMRA, but when the interest, the one they're actually giving the person on the ground, the vulnerable woman in the villages, is exorbitant compared to what was registered with you?
Thank you, Andrew. What we do when an institution is under WUMRA, we always follow up into their operations through off-site reporting. So if this institution report, like at the time of obtaining a license, it registered, it would charge 10% on a monthly basis. But when you go on the ground, that institution has charged 20% from the borrower. In any case, this borrower fails to pay, this borrower can move into WUMRA office, this borrower can move into courts of law. It is implied into our law that if a money lender or an institution charged more interest that me, a borrower, I cannot pay, you can, the judge, it is upon the magistrate or the judge to actually cancel the agreement of the loan, which was between me and the lender. And that upon that time, the judge or magistrate can even decide for me to pay only the principal. The principal, what do I mean? The loan which was disbursed to me, the loan amount that I was disbursed to, maybe the loan amount is 10 million. The judge can decide pay only 10 million, leave the interest, because the interest was exorbitant. So all the institutions that are outside there, they are aware. Actually, when you register that you're going to be charging 10% on this product per month or 5%, you cannot go against what you registered with us. Still, it is implied in the law. If you give any misleading information, you can still be convicted by courts of law.
Okay, thank
you,
you so much. Rachel, we'll tap in you a little later. Now, Maureen Appeal from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Thank you so much for joining us this very great morning. But the exciting conversation is about women. So, Maureen, we want to know what happens to the UWEP funds, the project. We understand it's a very good project, but what is its clear strategy, and how can the women, the vulnerable women in the different localities plug in?
Thank you very much. Thank you, the organizers, for this dialogue. We are happy to take part in this. As government of Uganda, it has come to the rescue of women, because the women, from all researches and studies, we know that women are business people. When you give a woman a coin, she will multiply this coin and it will have better impact in either the family or the household where she lives. So women, by nature, I would say, have been marginalized in all aspects of life. And the women in Uganda, for the case of Uganda, women are least educated. Women do not have opportunities like the male counterparts have. And this, to a great extent, has affected women in businesses, in whatever
No, technology is not. Maureen, can you still hear me? Ah, my God. Well, technology is not doing us quite well. But Maureen, I'm sure as soon as we get back, shortly after this break, you're going to be the first person to start this conversation. We're talking about economic recovery, especially with the women. The hashtag on Twitter is economic recovery 20. Very great afternoon. It's Andrew Chamagero, and we're live from Kampala's Sweden Conference Center. We're having this conversation about recovery, especially women in business. This is a conversation that has great stakeholders in this. We have NAU, we have FIDE Uganda, we have Uhuru, and then we have Dr. Fred Muhumuza from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. And of course, we have, someone from HUMRA, the Uganda Micro Money Lenders Regulatory Authority, and we have Jen Grace Amoge from Uhuru, and then we have Maureen Apio from Gender. Maureen, before we left, you were making a submission about the UWEP money. How far?
Thank you very much. The network is not very good, but I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, loud and clear, Maureen. Carry on.
Well, from Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, we are glad that the government is supporting vulnerable women to be able to access free interest loans. And these are women who are unbankable. And when I talk about unbankable women, these are women who do not have a backup, who do not have collateral to be able to access funds like some of the women who are educated. So these women have been carefully thought of by the government so that they are able to get what they are not able to get before. So we have the unbankable women. These are rural women. Some are also in the urban setting. And the loan is to help them set up, establish, grow their enterprises, because women from researches and from studies show that they are able to do businesses. But what is lacking, what is making it difficult for them to do businesses? One, they are not able to access credit from financial institutions because they do not have the collateral. But now the government has come in to support these women due to the fact that women form majority of the population in Uganda. And when you have the majority, depending on the few that are working, you find that our economy is dragged behind. So the government came with this program, Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, to give free interest loan to women to be able to do their businesses. So as I talk now, this program started in the financial year 2015-2016 to advance loans to women who are in groups in their different local governments. This is to help them in their different businesses. And then when they access these loans, it is a loan that does not require a collateral. Their only collateral is being in group. as long as they can come together as groups, they access this fund, they apply for it in their respective local government from the sub-county, and then they apply for this loan. When they get the loan, they're able to operationalize their different businesses. So this business, to some extent, and the loan that the women have been acquiring from government of Uganda has helped them. Some of the groups have been able to grow their enterprises from the minimum level to a very high level, because the challenges that the government came and brought forward is that microfinance institutions are giving loan to women, yes, but what are the conditions of getting this loan? What are the conditions of women paying back this loan? So this has tried to address the gap of women who do not have access to loan. But also you find that if a woman is to get loan from a microfinance institution, and say you have loan for 6 months and you have to pay back, then we find that a condition like COVID now comes in. What happens to this woman's business? So that is why UWEP has come in to support these women with, I would say, user-friendly loan that will help them in this time of hardship. So it has been a very unfortunate situation that women businesses have been affected by COVID. In the 5 years that this program has been operational, so many women have accessed loans. As we close the financial year 2019-2020, about 67 billion already been disbursed to women groups, meaning women are already operating in the different businesses that have been financed countrywide, all local governments, and this has benefited about 11,000 women projects countrywide. So we see that women who have accessed this money have been able to do businesses, and some of them have successfully paid back the loan that they have got. Now, in this time of COVID, we have got cases that are coming in from local governments of how the COVID has affected women groups in so many different ways. One, some of the groups are not able to continue operating their businesses. Why? During the time of the lockdown, some of the service industries where women are doing their services have been locked down. So this has forced the women to close their businesses. And then some of the women, because they're already operating as groups, during the lockdown, there was no movement. So this, to a great extent, affected the businesses of women. Now, as a government, the program has come in to support them, to access loan that will allow them operate. And I would say this is a user-friendly loan which gives opportunity to women to utilize this fund for the first 1 year without any attachment. So when the groups get this money, in the second year, that's when they are able to pay a small user fee that we call service fee. So in this time of COVID, we want to assess, which is already happening, to know to what extent has women groups been affected by this COVID, to what extent have their businesses been affected, and then how can this group be helped? So this is a case by case, and also it's by local government, because some of the women groups have accessed money, but even in the lockdown, for example, a farming community, they have had opportunity to continue with their farming. So some of the businesses have been greatly affected, while others have also not been so much affected. So in this time of COVID, we find that assessment is being done to see how best these women groups can be supported. And then if we find that their projects have been greatly affected by COVID, then we recommend reschedulement of their repayments based on how much these groups have been affected, and also how much time do they need to work with this money and then be able to pay back. So for me, it is a very good program that is supporting women who have not been able to get money because they don't have collateral to operationalize their businesses in different ways. So as we can see, the categories of women that are being supported, we find that they are in retail businesses, they are in agriculture, but also few are still in value addition or agro industry, and also ICT. So we want to see how can we support and strengthen the women to continue working, much as it is alone. How can they do better? How can they be better business women? So even when we are looking at the most vulnerable women, we need also to continue to build them so that they are better business people.
Okay,
And,
thank you, Maureen.
This has been a 5-year program.
Maureen, can I tap a little bit later to that? Thank you so much. Your submission has actually made a lot of sense here. Now I'm bringing this back to you, Monica, from the National Association of Women's Organization in Uganda. She says that they're trying to readjust. They're trying to look at the loans and restructure them, comparing on how, someone was faring with the previous payment or the ground. Does this make sense to you with regards to the UWEP funds?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think it makes sense in terms of trying to reschedule the loans. I think for me, the gap with UWEP is that it targets women in groups, and I think they are given about 8 million shillings in that group to initiate something. In Luero at the moment, we are working with 65 groups. So if you have supported only, say, 11 groups in Luero district, what does that mean in terms of women who are disadvantaged and cannot access collateral? And yet they are the producers. They are the ones who are in agriculture, and it's that agriculture that provides food for us, but also it's the one that actually provides raw material for processing in the enterprises, the small, medium, and large enterprises that we are talking about. So I think that there is, in addition to the rescheduling, there has to be an effort towards expanding the UWEP so that it reaches every woman, all those disadvantaged women, the 70% of the women in the rural areas who are in agriculture and other businesses. We have women who are doing crafts. We have women who, I talked about the women with disabilities because of their, many of them because of their poor sight, their inability to walk around. They do tailoring, they do knitting. Right now they cannot sell. The groups that we work with have been making uniforms for the schools in Luero. The schools are closed, so they don't have access to money. So how can they be supported? They want to reinvest and do something else, but do they have access to UWEP? It has to be expanded to cover
that it reaches every woman.
Or every woman.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Freedom Humuza here. We have the money that was borrowed from IMF. We had some money that came from the World Bank. How can best organizations like FIDA, ONAWU, Uhuru, and whichever organizations that be, how can they follow up this money for accountability? Because we just keep hearing, the Ministry of Finance borrowed this much money, it's going to do this. And how best can we follow the implementation? We never hear of the implementation strategy. We are never included as a country that this is your call to actions as citizens. You're going to find this money here. How best can we follow up accountability for such big monies?
Thank you, Andrew. Two things. One is you should also have included me in how big can I be.
But you're with the minister.
Joining. I'm not with the ministry.
An advisor to the minister.
I was an advisor to the ministry, but
Yes.
once an advisor, you
stay an advisor.
You still advise, but
Yes.
I don't want my colleagues in the ministry to think I'm masquerading there as one of them.
Okay.
So I too can join these two ladies
Oh,
and
yes.
everybody else.
How do we
to say
follow the
do we
accountability?
follow up? But now where I get out of their pocket is I'm still working with the ministry through another entity of the government. The Operation Wealth Creation requested us to use our experience and knowledge of government systems to do exactly what you have asked.
Okay. Accountability and following
and
up this
follow-up
money.
of results, follow-up of policies. So Operation Wealth Creation, which people knew was doing with delivery of inputs for agriculture, has actually upped its bar to say, no, I can't just watch down there, just like the ladies here are presenting the case. You focus too much down, you miss the top level, and yet the problems are coming from the top level.
Absolutely.
So they have gotten interested in how do we become a corrective intervention to correct so many things that are wrong. Now, from the academia, if somebody is not bankable, you don't give them a loan. So already the web policy needs to be corrected.
Okay.
It's wrong. She has said these were unbankable women. Then why do you bank them?
Okay.
But that does not mean you exclude them.
You're
It
excluding
means you
them,
give
yes.
them a grant until they have upgraded to a level when they become bankable. And as I referred to earlier, the only entity here which does that is the BRAC model. They will come and look at a person who really needs help, but say this one, even if you gave them a loan, they have no food to eat. They are going to eat it.
Oh, yes.
So let's first cover their problem of food. Give them some work for pay. Either they wash cars or do what, but to get something to eat, so that your loan is secure.
Oh, yeah.
Then teach them what to do. The thing that she's been talking, Monica has been talking about. When WEP gave the money, they didn't teach these people, how do you count your money? Remember, you have not lent me the money, you have lent it to a business.
Oh, yes.
Which business they didn't even have. You
And
told
they
them,
don't
here's
understand
8
how to
million,
run.
go and start a business. Now, who did you lend? How do you turn around to come and ask me to pay? You're not even following up whether we started the business or not.
Yes.
So you first train them to run this business. Then when the business is viable and you have worked with them, then you say, you know what to do, move along with it. Now, the only country in the world that does this, one of the few countries, the social market economy of Germany. They will not allow a lender to foreclose if you have not shown that you didn't do your part as a lender. Don't lend a vulnerable
Did you train
person.
someone before you give them
Yes,
the money?
don't lend somebody when you're targeting their house or their bicycle or their land. If the courts decide that that seems to have been your intention, forget about the recovery of that loan. Each one of you count your losses. So I think these are some of the things we need to correct in the government programs. So when we come to hold government accountable, we're holding them accountable on what did the money do, but what did you yourself do in designing this particular intervention? If the error is on the side of government, then government should be held accountable for designing a wrong project and a wrong program, and don't begin to harass the civilians. So holding them accountability begins with the policy level.
Then it trickles down.
Before you borrow. Because quite often we've realized we are borrowing when we shouldn't even be borrowing. Because you are borrowing for a wrong thing. From day one, the project is faulty. Now, I cannot even come to hold you accountable on the money that was not going to deliver
on a faulty project.
On a faulty project.
I agree.
So we are raising the bar for accountability, but we are saying don't just come to hold accountable government. Why did you put this money? In the first place, you borrowed wrongly. We have borrowed money for skilling Ugandans. Oh, yes. A lot of money into vocational schooling. Evidence shows us that the average schooling age of a Ugandan is 6.9 years. Literally, they don't finish primary. Oh, yes. Now you're borrowing $150 million, skilling Ugandans, building a vocational school, and saying minimum entry requirement is senior 4. When you know on average, Ugandans never finish P7. That skilling Ugandan would never work. And yet you are presenting it as a project that's going to help the women. Majority of the women never finish P7, so already they are off that project. So we are raising the bar of accountability to begin with policy, designs, implementation, and then what did you do with the money? And that is still a very gray area, I must say. And all of us need to come down and rethink that. How do you help these women? And let's say collateral is never the reason why you should be lending. As I've said, you lend to the business. Collateral is in the event the business fails
to pay.
That's when you go to collateral. But if we discover that you lent without looking at these events that may make the business fail to pay, and you jointly didn't work with the borrower to work on these events, you lose the right to foreclose.
Dr. Fred.
And this is what I would want the law in Uganda to do. Learn from the German laws. If you as a lender,
you don't do your work,
you didn't do your work, don't push the entire business on the borrower.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Fred, does this, from your submission, does this mean that in one or the other, the ones at the top are detached entirely from what's on the ground, or they're adamantly not paying attention?
I think they are not paying attention, and they need to. Now they will give you the system. The ones at the top shouldn't be picking up these issues. That's our planning system.
Oh, yes.
Because it's not being respected. It's supposed to begin with a parish and a sub-county model.
Level, yes.
That arranges what does it want to do. This feeds into a district plan, which district feeds into a national plan. But we never respect those things. We only go to consult this people to get our allowances, and even though they say things, I've met many of them who say, but they never listen to us. We gave them these views. So the system is there, but the system is not working now. Part of the corrective intervention that Operation Wealth Creation is pushing, and good enough it is being picked up by the National Development Plan 3, and I've had one of the manifestos.
Yes, we are setting off to NDP3.
Is the parish model, which exactly is what Jane from Uhuru Institute is talking about.
Is alluding to you.
The cooperative is a very, very major grassroots institution that we must put out there. Not just people coming together in a circle. A cooperative is bigger.
Oh, yes.
And looks at so many things. It looks at inputs, it looks at training its people, supervising extension staff, making sure that the whole round picture, the four quadrants of the circle are addressed. Don't just get a circle and we put money there. These women may be paying WEP.
Oh, yes.
But from where? As I said, they are borrowing from their relatives to pay back this loan.
Oh, yes.
They are selling off their bicycles and dresses to pay back this loan.
Training.
So if you're only sitting at WEP and ticking boxes, oh, Jane has paid, oh, Elizabeth has paid, do you know the impact you have done on her? She's just sold her land. You have made her worse off. So accountability must go to the grassroots and say, if you want to improve this woman, don't leave her in a worse off situation. You would rather convert it into a grant. So as I'm saying, in the first place, I would convert a WEP into a grant. I don't want to say which political person should take capital out of that. All of them
But it's a grant.
all of them should, and say, what do you do with money?
It's a grant.
It's a grant.
Fred
And then
Muhumuza.
hold the PS and whoever responsible accountable for not making it a grant in the first place.
And the SAT.
Possibly fire them, or maybe discipline them, or maybe teach them a little bit more. But I don't want anybody to escape.
Oh,
Whoever
yes.
designed
Someone
it,
has to be accountable.
whoever designed it should give us some accountability.
Well, that is Dr. Fred Muhumuza explaining more on these issues, especially I love the fact that Webman should be grants. That makes a lot of sense. We're coming to that later. Well, tapping into a little bit now more into Jen Amuge Okello. Given that you're working with lots of people, especially in cooperatives, some people got the stimulus money. We saw teachers being given 2 billion or so, and we want to know, as Uhuru, the cooperatives, what have you done to follow up on this money, or how are you helping the teachers to have access to this kind of money, especially the women teachers?
I think you might be relying more on hearsay than the reality. From our recent publishing and investigations, the teachers haven't yet received the 20 billion. The president initially had talked of 2 billion shillings. And later on, when he got feedback that 2 billion shillings was peanuts, he then increased it to 20 billion shillings. But from at least 3 weeks ago, when we were running a story about this very money, we then got to understand that the teachers had not yet received this money because of some delays with the microfinance support center. And so it may be hard for me to comment on something that the teachers have not received. And probably that also gives me an opportunity to discuss the issue of how this money, the choice of cooperatives. Now, while cooperatives are viable vehicles for economic recovery, there must be voluntarism in the way that the members belong to these cooperatives. Imagine if these teachers got the 20 billion shillings, and this is emergency relief, and they are being told that to get emergency relief, you must belong to a cooperative. It's like you're in the theater and you're being told that if you do not bring your education certificate, you will not be able to be performed on a surgery. Now, therefore, this whole idea of putting relief money into a cooperative, which is supposed to be a business, for me is a total mismatch. We cannot have relief money and business money being mixed. So it takes me back to what Doctor has just talked about. When government is thinking about interventions for communities and the population, who is actually thinking about the intricate details of how these monies must be shared with the communities, or what levels of investment decision must be taken? So regarding the money, the teachers' money, the presidential pledge for the teachers, it's a complex mix. And I think we already know that the 25 billion shillings that was initially put through Microfinance Support Center, and later on parts of it went to Walimu Sacco, has a whole story with having some of the staff of the Microfinance Support Center actually being arrested. But also generally when you dig into the story, you see the corruption and all that that is coming in. So away from that, just looking at issues to do with monies that are coming from government, intervening for teachers or even for women generally. I think the question for us as a whole and for us in the cooperative movement is that economic empowerment needs to look at access to and the power over assets and decision making. And if you optimize the cooperative infrastructure, we can be able to have women and these teachers we talked about having access to assets and also power to make decisions. Back to the 20 billion shillings we've just talked about, do you really think that the teachers had the decision over this, how this money is allocated, the size, and how it would reach them? I doubt. So economic empowerment, economic recovery, really, we need to go back to the structural organizing from government's perspective and even the stakeholders. When money is borrowed on behalf of Ugandans to be given to women, how do the women decide on where this money eventually goes? If it is in business, if it is in cooperatives, all this needs to be done. I am aware that pandemics like COVID present very limited time for planning, and sometimes our planning is hasty based on that. However, we also believe that those that are charged with responsibility in government need to actually provide advice to the people that make decisions so that as a country we are not cheated, where we get monies and monies are not used, or where the money is actually ransacked by those that are in government. And I still think relating to the issue of government giving money to teachers, when you borrow a lift from what your web has actually undergone, where for women groups to access this money, there is a committee where the people that sit there are the LC1 and then also a committee that is represented mainly by the local government officials. We have seen that before 2017, a lot of this money was again stolen by these government officials, where they were originally signatories to these monies. Before the women could access this money, for the women to access this money, some of these officials had to sign as account holders together with these groups. So you can see that there's just a lot of what I would call katogo, and we really need to unpack this katogo and get ourselves organized and rally ourselves to serious and clear strategies to get the women what they deserve, because I don't think that women in Uganda are getting what they deserve. It is today someone waking up and seeing that there's a good program where they could make their own money to build apartments or to build whatever it is. And then these programs are put in place. And tomorrow, if you really ask a woman what they've got, I doubt whether they will point to what we are calling economic empowerment or economic recovery. So that is really in respect to the question asked.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen Muge Okello. We'll tap that a little later. But before we go for the break, coming up next, we're going to be talking to Rachel Muhwezi, the manager microfinance institutions from the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, tackling road to recovery in this new norm of COVID-19. Well, we have Rachel Vanessa Muhwezi, the manager microfinance institutions from the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority. Now, Rachel, let's talk about something to do with the agreements. The way the agreements are made on the ground, there is a statement I would like to bring to attention. I'm sure you know it. From the Luganda aspect, it says, Nze nguziza, that I have sold off. So someone gives in a collateral, but the agreement says he has already given it away. these kind of agreements, Rachel, are still on the ground. And from what we understand, that UMRA is still not so much on the ground, not well entrenched on the ground. What is UMRA doing about these, and how do we mitigate through these as people in communities, or as the women are trying to, find their way to recovery? How best can they go about this? Rachel?
Thank you, Andrew. When you look at what the microfinance institutions and money lenders, what they are doing, when you talk about the loan agreement, where a money lender, most cases it is done by money lenders,
yes,
not the tier 4 microfinance institutions.
Yes, yes.
Maybe the viewer can ask, what is a tier 4 microfinance institution, or what are tier 4 microfinance institutions? Under tier 4 microfinance institutions, we have what we call SACCOs. All SACCOs outside there, they are under the tier 4. We have the non-deposit taking institutions, we have the self-help groups, we have the commodity-based microfinance institutions. I'll go back to the question. When the money lender writes an agreement of a sales agreement, actually it is not a loans agreement, it is a sales agreement, where the lender drafts an agreement that I have. Now I move into a money lender's office, I want to acquire 5 million, and the money lender drafts a sales agreement instead of a loans agreement that I, Rachel, have sold my house worth 5 million, and this money lender will disburse the 5 million to me. That is totally against the law. And in any case, a money lender drafts such an agreement, that money lender is totally doing what is prescribed in the tier 4 microfinance institutions and Money Lenders Act. What they're supposed to do now that we are recovering, the businesses or the women in business, when they're disbursing these loans, they're supposed to draft the loans agreements. And this is a sensitization we are carrying out countrywide on our radio campaigns, on our TV campaigns, that any person lending to you money should not draft a sales agreement. It should be a loans agreement with all the charges included in the loans agreement. In any case, a money lender or a lender of an institution charges a certain percentage that was not prescribed in the loans agreement at the time of me obtaining a loan. I am not supposed to pay that interest rate, because the lender is supposed to be transparent. It is prescribed in the law. And what is supposed to be included into the loans agreement, the interest amount, the penalties, all the loan charges, they're all supposed to be prescribed in the loans agreement. Now that the women actually are trying to run to these institutions, when they talk about the unbankable, they are meaning that these women could not access the traditional banks. And if they cannot access the traditional banks, they are running into the informal microfinance sector. So what UMRA is doing, it is trying to clean the informal sector by sensitizing the public that if you're outside there and you want to borrow money, please sign what is called a loans agreement, not a sales agreement, where someone is going to come up and take up your house at 5 million, which is worthy 100 million. Or someone wants to take up your house at 10 million, which is worthy 100 million. So UMRA is carrying out the sensitizations. Even during this post-COVID, we are doing what we call digital sensitization by sending messages to the communities, sending out information on the media campaigns that you should not sign a loans agreement. Even when you're running for credit, we all know that the women in business, all the savings they had in their households was consumed up. During COVID, when they're trying to meet their health obligations, they're trying to meet up the food in their homes, and they weren't working. So even when they're running for credit supply into these institutions, we are sensitizing them that please don't sign a sales agreement, but run for a loans agreement. You'll be protected by the regulator if you signed a loans agreement. And all our licenses outside there, at the time of obtaining a license, they all know what is prescribed in the law, that someone is supposed to constitute what is called a loans agreement, not a sales agreement. And any money lender who has actually not obtained the license, they all know that they are operating their business against the Tier 4 Microfinance Institutions and Money Lenders Act. Because if someone is operating, is outside there, someone will say, what if I obtain a loan in a money lender who is not licensed? I'm a woman, I move into this money lender, I don't know if this money lender is licensed or not licensed. All our money lenders hang around their licenses in their operating areas. That is the only way you can know, and always that information is there if you search with us, if this money lender is licensed or not licensed. And in this crisis, in the post-COVID, where everyone is running for credit supply, please sign the agreements that you'll be able to commit yourself, or you'll be able to meet the loan obligations.
Thank you.
You shouldn't sign what is a sales agreement, because on top of it, someone will tell you, bring maybe your mortgage here and I'll disburse to you this amount of money.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Andrew. That is what the public or the viewers should consider in signing the loans agreement.
Thank you.
Post-COVID.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll get a little back to you later. Now, tapping into, we have appeal, Maureen from Gender. Earlier on, you said the money from your web and whatever it's doing and what you're doing to assess the current project on the ground. It's, you know, it's very exciting. But now I need to know what is in plan, what is in place for the women in this new norm of COVID-19 from the ministry.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I want to thank the earlier speakers for adding on to this program. One thing that we need to know is that this program has come in to support these women. And the unfortunate part of the COVID has impinged on their businesses. But now, as Ministry of Gender, we are doing an assessment, as I said earlier, to find out the effect of COVID. But also, we are trying to reschedule repayments of these women groups based on the effect of the COVID on them. But also, we have learned from the first phase of this program, which ended in the financial year 2019-2020. The program is a very good program. And when we talk about grants, government has been giving grants to communities, but it has not in any way contributed to development of our country. Now, this model has come in to support women who will be busy in doing businesses to lead to growth. Because when you look at the goal of this program, is to support women develop themselves, but also contribute to the economic growth and development of our country. So when you look at earlier programs that have been given to women or the community as grants, we did not move anywhere in any way. So this program is going to continue in the phase 2. One, we are going to focus more on supporting women towards the recovery by looking at their, also looking at how the country is moving in this era of COVID, because we cannot tell that by tomorrow COVID will end, or maybe today COVID will end. But we are going to continue supporting our women groups, but also as government, we'll continue to see how best the groups that are being affected are also supported. But also we have policy of refinancing a group, especially if you find that their businesses have been too much affected that they cannot stand to continue doing their businesses. So that will help them to pick up from where they've fallen. So this helps women groups as long as they are coming up with the concerns of need to be supported again. But also, we are continuing to partner, bring in more partners on board to help us, because we are also aware and constrained by the fact that the funding for the Women's Fund is so little. In the planning, we're supposed to have, in the first phase, planned was 585 billion, but received was only 107 billion. So you find that we have a lot of gap in terms of funding, since it is a fully funded program by the government of Uganda or the taxes of Uganda. So we want to continue to partner at the moment, we are doing partnership with UN Women, so that the women who have already picked on with their businesses, we see how to address in terms of skilling them. And as I mentioned earlier, the women are still doing traditional businesses, but you want them to now go into those businesses like value addition, those businesses of agro industry, of ICT, because the country or the world is moving towards ICT. So this, in partnership with, would be able to train and do capacity building for women, but also the aspect of marketing of products, because not all groups have been affected. Groups that are doing farming, they're okay. Some of them are really doing very well because the COVID is not in the garden. So how can we now help these women to market their products? And then in this phase now, we are trying to support women. We are looking at how women can be supported to do that. So we are going to aggressively look into partnership for, and then do linkages of women as enterprises to incubation facilities.
Okay.
So that their products are made better and they can be easily linked to market.
Thank you
but
so much.
Also, we shall promote one more. We shall promote use of simple, appropriate technology, because women are doing businesses, yes, but what kind of technology are they using? So that even if they're in farming, how can they have better products so that this product can easily be marketed?
Okay.
So that is the area that we are going to into.
Thank you so much, Maureen. You've heard what Maureen has said. We have 10 minutes to wrap this conversation up. Elizabeth, you seem to disagree with Maureen about the UWEP money, especially the UWEP approach. What's your take on that?
I don't disagree with her entirely.
You have issues with the way she approaches it?
I just feel like UWEP would have done a lot more to support some of these groups that they're dealing with. This on rescheduling and all that. And FIDA right now is actually striking collaboration between gender and ourselves on having research conducted on the groups that had already received the money. On how have they been affected by COVID, to inform the ministry's decision to either refinance, to either find better mechanisms of collecting back this money from these groups, or reinvesting it in other ventures. I also wanted to speak very quickly about the issue of UMRA and having guidelines in place. So I think we need to rethink or think better when we are getting mechanisms to handle some of these things. When there's a guideline in place and a woman in Barra does not know about it, does not know that she's capable of walking to premium credit to renegotiate a loans agreement, then the guideline does not serve its purpose, right? Because you're putting it in place to protect Elizabeth from being exploited by a money lender. So if I'm not aware of this guideline, then it does not help. So I just wanted to quickly also speak about the fact that in July, FIDA entered a collaboration with UMRA to start having radio talk shows and having dialogues in the different districts to just let people know that please reach out to an officer at FIDA, work with them to the microfinance center, work with them to a money lender, have you draft a proper agreement saying I'm unable to pay between this period, can I be excused to this much? This is what I'm doing to ensure that you have in place, because there are so many vulnerabilities that most of these clients face that just having a guideline in place may not be able to solve the problem. So yes, that's what I wanted to mention about very quickly. And then when Monica spoke about inclusion, I just wanted to also tap into the fact that when we speak about inclusion, we want it to come from all levels. And I think we shall have to deliberately invest in cooperatives because they make bargaining power better.
Deliberately?
Yes.
I like the word
let it not be a second-hand thought of maybe cooperatives should work because they influence better, because the voice is bigger. They bargain better for prices of products for most of their cooperative members. They have bigger money because there are more members involved in it. They are better managed because they have all these processes in place. We have Uhuru managing these cooperatives to make sure that they are able to have a better bargain in the different economic spaces that they get in. So I want to agree that cooperatives are indeed a vehicle that we can look into. And two, that UWEP is a very viable solution. We just need to work a few things here and there. And I'm glad that we have this collaboration that we have with gender.
Yes.
So I hope that in the future we shall see some of these things unfold. And with Umrah, I think we'll be able to have a better...
Dr. Fred Muhumuza, as you're wrapping up, what could be your recommendations with all this conversation you've had today?
Yeah, COVID has taught us many things, and we should never miss the opportunity of learning from the worst. It's what doctors do when they do post-mortem. That just your hands can infect your whole body.
Oh, yes.
So we need to take an ecosystem approach. And some of these things are the things we need to really correct. It can be very dangerous for government to borrow money. You saw 6 trillion that we want to borrow after borrowing more from the banking sector to go and think you have given the women a cheap loan.
Oh, yeah.
Now, these women, whatever they produce, the entity that buys from them borrows from the other banks, where now government has crowded them out.
Oh, yes.
So these women will have their pineapples deep in the village, and the person who drives a lorry to buy from them, his lorry is being confiscated by the bank. So if you don't look at an ecosystem,
The cycle that supports...
you will miss
yeah.
it. So you're saying I've given them loans for WEP, now they can access the market, but you have just disenfranchised the person who links them
should
to the
buy
market
to, yes.
by government coming in to borrow to go and help the same women. So that's why I'm saying when I look back, the failure of these women in a WEP, the failure of that man, partly the government is responsible.
Oh, yes.
So don't go to enforce those loans, convert them into grants, and don't harass those women. And I will speak this until it happens.
Okay. Wrapping this up, Madame Monica, what could be your recommendations so that we can have the women recover?
I think for me, I will still go back to my point of inclusion, and at every level, the woman, that rural woman, should be included. And I would like to borrow from Elizabeth and say, even for the UWEP, there should be an evaluation.
Of the project?
Yes, and that evaluation should be participatory, so that all the stakeholders, including ourselves, are involved in this evaluation, so that we see where did we function very well, where are some of the gaps, where are some of the challenges, what can we do better? And we are thinking about it together with those very women who access these loans, because they will tell you what works for them and what does not work for them. I think it's also important, yes, women are in agriculture, and we all accept and we document it all the time. After they have done agriculture, then what? Where is the market? Dr. Muhumuza has just talked about the guy in the lorry drives the truck to go and buy the pineapple. And when they get there, they say, your road is very bad and the cost is very high for picking these things from you, so I'm buying each pineapple at 500 shillings. Yeah.
That's exploited.
Exactly.
Wow.
So the women are getting exploited. Yes, the liberal economy might be good, but have we found out, have we tried to investigate to what extent it's affecting that person who is producing using their own energies at very high costs, and they're getting nothing out of it? And again, it's about the issue of counting. There are very few women in the community there who can count and say, I actually invested so much and I expect so much. In my community, there's a common saying that a farmer is stupid, because when somebody comes to buy, as long as it's being bought, they sell.
Yes.
They don't count the costs. How
yes.
much did I spend to get there? So one of the things that we should be doing, what the government of Uganda should be doing, is enabling farmers to access market.
Oh, yes.
How do we support the farmer to be able to access the market, even as we are trying to support them to access all these inputs, the finances and what have you? But there's what Dr. Muhumuza talked about earlier. You give a woman a loan and the child falls sick, she'll sell that goat to access health. Yes. So, like we say, human rights is it's universal and they're interrelated.
Yes.
We should also be looking at other rights. Even if you support me to be able to do a business, and even however much my business is thriving, and tomorrow my child is sick, I am going to take that money and try to find health care for my child. So how do we improve the social services? Health care, good roads, good education, so that these women now are comfortable.
And
In
they
terms
can-
of health services, they're comfortable. In
Yeah.
terms of education for their children,
They're
they're comfortable. All protection rights, they're comfortable. Then they can do their
recover.
businesses very well. They can do their agriculture, they can do their other businesses very well, and they can recover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That is Madam Monica. Now, wrapping this up from you, Rachel Muhwezi, what could be your recommendation from UMRA?
Our recommendations as the regulator would encourage all women in business to deal with licensed Tier 4 microfinance institutions and money lenders, that even when you're running for credit supply, please seek out for an institution which is licensed by Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority. And our offices are now open to licensed circles because their regulations were put into Gazette in April. So all circles come next year will have licenses whose saving base is below 1.5 billion and the capital requirement is below 500 million.
Okay.
So all women in business that will be dealing with the Tier 4 microfinance institutions kindly borrow from these licensed institutions. When we come upon on the groups where women collect themselves into groups with a common bond to solve a certain problem, and sometimes grant is put into those groups, we are encouraging those groups to adopt the operational guidelines which will be published by UMRA come next year.
Okay.
That we shall have operational guidelines by all the self-help groups in Uganda.
Okay.
And we shall be regulating these groups to abide by those operational guidelines that will be put in place by UMRA. All these groups that are being given grants, you form a group, but you have a common interest. You want to solve a certain problem, and you have saving and credit within yourselves. Even UMRA will be linking these groups to the banks.
Thank you so much,
all
Rachel.
women in business will be benefiting into this because
Thank
the
you,
regulator
Rachel.
is there to create sanity and confidence into the microfinance sector that is under Tier 4
Thank you.
Microfinance Institutions and Money
Thank you.
Lenders Act.
Thank you, Rachel. Wrapping this up, let me talk to Jen Amoge Okello. What could be your recommendations in a minute, Jen?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Just borrowing from the cooperative values of self-help, self-responsibility, and solidarity, I would like to encourage Ugandans and Africa generally as a continent to optimize the infrastructure of cooperatives and to know that the challenges that we have within ourselves can actually be solved by ourselves, and that can best be done through cooperatives where we can accelerate all the pillars of development that we actually have set for ourselves. So it would be nice having all of you join us in the cooperative movement and drive the agenda for ourselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we're wrapping this up, I want to thank those who have been with us from where we started. Because of time, we cannot read the tweets and tap a little bit in your feedback, but we really want to appreciate you, all those that have been with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Ken Muhomuza. Thank you so much, Madam Monica. Thank you so much, FIDA Uganda. You have one last word to say for FIDA?
Please,
Just one in a minute.
One in a minute. One of the recommendations that I would like to just present to the government is one, to have a risk-sharing strategy in the economic stimulus package plan that they have in place.
Okay.
Yeah, and then two, just to the donors, to the financial institutions giving in money, World Bank, European Union, please, can we have a responsibility, ways through which you can involve institutions like NGOs, economists like Dr. Fred, to hold government accountable.
Thank you so much, those who have been a part of this conversation. My name is Andrew Chamagero, and those who have been a part of the conversation, be more part of the conversation with the hashtag. Have a